Council 21 podcasts. I'm Middle March. My co-hosts are Piv and Dovetail, and our very, very special guest today is Rob Salazar. Rob, I'm going to put something on the screen, and I want you to tell me, boom, what is this? What are we looking at right now?
That's a paloma in Spanish, which literally means dove. That's a firework made out of newsprint. They are incredibly common here. They're sold during the holidays or festivities. So that's what you're seeing. But that's a big, big motherfucker, because we have different sizes, and that's the one that could blow your hand off.
On this episode of the Capsule 21 podcast, we talked to artist Roberto Salazar about his artwork, advertisement, media literacy, the death of facts. We talked about communication, we talked about AI, and it was a great one.
Hi, this is Roberto Salazar, and you're listening to Capsule 21.
So there's something in here, basically. There's like a powder of some kind, probably.
Oh, no, of course there's powder. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you light it. Is this the, I was actually wondering about this photo. Is this the wick here, or is that just, okay, that's the wick. So you light that, and then you throw it.
And famously, those kind of fireworks, that has an extra long wick. The usual one is just a thing like this that it barely give you any time to get rid of the thing. So those are a little bit creepy. Yeah.
That's man. And when I think about that, like I'm watching a lot of The Simpsons. There's a funny Simpsons bit where it's like a guy goes to, like, he's fighting in the war and he pulls the pin off the grenade and goes like, "This is for Johnny and for Joe and for Bob and even for Jimmy, who's a real jerk." But I said, and blows him up. And so
Fun
that's
fun fact. I have thrown a live grenade in real life.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Did you dedicate it to anyone before you threw it?
I did not have a long list of dedications. It was very scary. I did not want to lose a hand. You pull the pin and you throw it and you fucking duck.
That's
crazy.
That's insane. So yeah, Dove is a former Marine, and so he was doing this above board.
Yeah. yeah. This
Okay.
is not a back market gray grenade.
Street legal. So I wanted to open with this, and this is a metaphor that Rob himself has used, but it's kind of a cool idea because first of all, it's just like a cool looking device that is like kind of it's not like some prepackaged, like when I was growing up it was like really prepackaged fireworks, and this is something you make, and it has an added element of danger to it. It's kind of fun, but it's also interesting because what you are doing is you are blowing up newspaper essentially. And so there's maybe one might even say, and you literally said this, Rob, so I'm going to be honest, I just, one might say there's a metaphorical aspect to the thing we're looking at right now. And what would you say that metaphorical aspect?
Well,
is?
Well, it's literal and symbolic. It's media itself. Just whatever its possibilities, are just disabled by exploding it, in a literal manner. You also have that layer of, like, for instance, on that firework, you can read the word surrealism. It says el surrealismo on the yellow part. But if you're lucky enough, maybe you get a firework that's talking about inflation or COVID or a political candidate, or or a tragic news or something that's nice, so there's that layer too, and of course on a slightly more sophisticated level, stories held human groups together, where that kind of species, and so all the problem with blowing that kind of media is that somehow our narrative compass, if there's one, it's also gone. So one of the things that I've been noticing is how those stories are like a kind of glue. They keep groups functional in a way. Yeah.
I love that. And I wasn't even thinking about this before. Now you sort of say it, kind of comes to my mind looking at this, like, newspaper itself, beyond this specific and very poignant example. Newspaper has this bizarre quality where newspaper is kind of almost, you could say, the universal life hack material, right? You use it to create a firework. You're painting something, you put it on the ground. You're starting a regular fire in a normal fireplace. You put the newspaper in there. You could use newspaper to wrap a present, although it's not considered to be the best thing ever to do. You bulb newspaper. You could use it. And the other thing I'd say about newspaper is it's kind of it transcends class, I think, in a way. Like if you think about life hacks, maybe if you're super duper rich, you don't need life hacks. You can use the real thing. But newspaper, even as I don't know any super duper rich people, but I think even a super duper rich person, if they're carving a pumpkin with their kid, they put newspaper down. And so maybe this reflects a kind of overarching thing here where we instead of hugging the facts and kissing them, put the pumpkin stuff on them and blow them up. Is this like a subconscious element of popular life hack culture?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, naturally, I wasn't thinking specifically about that use. I was just, like, to be honest, there was an image that, well, I have that anecdote of me walking in December on the street as a child, and just like the streets were littered with the pieces of newspaper from using those fireworks, and it was beautiful. And telling, to see photographs that were half burned. And then as I grew old, I stumbled upon this movie by Spielberg, right? A List of Schindler. And there's also an image that struck me in the same way, where one of the characters is walking and it's kind of like snowing, but it's not snowing, it's ashes. And it's ashes from the Holocaust, and they're flying in the air. So there's a composite of that part of the movie and also this scene from my childhood that just stuck. And I'm also interested in like the material part of media. So media carries, this semiotical layer, but also it carries a physicality, the medium itself. So it's interesting, right, to suddenly realize the materiality aspect of it, the material one. Yeah.
I love that. And to me, like reading about your work as I was sort of doing research for this was just, fascinating because, and you can see this if you're at home watching the background of this. The background of this we're going to talk about in a second. You can see this on stream. The participants can't see this. They will look at it later, maybe. If you see this, you might wonder, what is this background? And, to me, when it comes to art, you really need to understand the story to understand. That's kind of what this podcast is about. You need to understand the story, understand what is going on. And so if you confront this as a normal person who has no idea what we're talking about, this image here, I mean, end of facts obviously conveys something, but if you confront something like this, hard to understand what the point of this is. But once you are explained even just a little bit, it really you are seeing something else. The fact that is this image changes. It looks different to me now. And so if I'm correct, one way you can view this image, there are several others, as I think you used the phrase like, the ashes of meaning somewhere. There's just the newspaper explodes, so to speak, and you see this. And so this is what we are dealing with when it comes to, meaning, basically. That's one way to look at this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another way to look at that, even taking a step back, zooming out, is just, I mean, this abstract texture, and immediately, to me at least, it connects with a kind of like some like abstract expressionism energy of sorts. It's in my imagination, it doesn't take a huge leap to connect it with a like a Pollock, like a splattered paint, aesthetic. So that's the first step, and I just like to think in layers. So to me, that's already attractive in its very almost minimal politics, in the sense that, and by that I mean that it's just an image that is refraining to give you something specific, and its flatness, it doesn't have any salient aspects. It's just like a there's a flatness to them that I love. And that's the first layer. And then the second layer is like they all come from an advertisement that I scanned. That's the second one, you know. And then there are all these stories around them, and they just get you further and further into possibilities. And that's just mine, you know. But you can build clearly your own. And of course, there's also like an astronomical feeling to them, you know. In a way, they also look like a starry night, you know, like a galaxy.
Very very true. And I think, yeah, so focusing on, okay, so this is one thing I kind of want to drill into here, because I haven't really seen you discuss this or seen this, or it usually hasn't come to me, like really what we are looking at now in terms of this advertisement. So if I were to just sort of say what this is a Scotch advertisement. Ballantines is a advertisement for Scotch, and this was in a Penthouse magazine. Is that right? And you only read Penthouse to find the media subjects of your artwork, right? That's a joke?
No, but there's a story to them. You know, there's a story how I came upon them, and of course there are issues from the 1978. It's a different dynamic. It's the year I was born, and it's a different media context. It's a different reality. So that's one of the things that interested me about them. Yeah.
And so, but I just explained my joke. Like back then, for the 9-year-olds and so forth watching this podcast, so-called quote unquote adult content was packaged along with like an interview of like Steve Jobs or something in like Playboy or Penthouse, and there was like this thing together. And so what people would say if they were caught with Playboys, they say, I only read it for the articles. And then it's like, well, I guess that's why the articles are there. So Rob only looks at it for the art thing. It's a joke, whatever. And even the adult stuff was tamer back then. But what's interesting to me about this, right, is like, let's contrast it, because we're talking about the 70s. Here is this is a newspaper. This is another image about the 70s. This happened in the 70s, I guess 74. So before this. So you have this and you have this. And so when I look at this, let's just go to the headline, because especially anyone watching this will know, like, let's just read the headline. Nixon resigns, right? That to me is a fact, right? Like, it's actually not so easy. And we were going to get into this later about like to say what a fact is, because if the thing said man lands on the moon, it's like, well, is that a fact, or is that, you know, we don't know. We really don't know. But Nixon resigns, you say it, he resigns, you can't unsay it. If Nixon had said, I resign, just kidding, that might be ambiguous, but he didn't do that. He resigned. This is a fact. So if I were trying to say in a dumb way, a pre-art way, my way, if I were trying to do something with the death of facts, I might take this thing, a fact, and blow it up and kill it. Whereas you took this, which is, you know, fact maybe in different senses. We're going to talk about this, but this is different. Clearly, this is different. And so my question is, why didn't you do this or whatever? You know, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, well, it's there's something about an advertisement, right? I believe that in terms of semiotics, you know, in terms of its capacity to carry meaning or to deploy a specific narrative, advertisements are incredibly robust, right? They are expensive, and those agencies charge a high price because of that, like resiliency of a story, of a narrative. You know, to me, it's one of the strongest narrative artifacts societies have come up with, and also, so that interests me. But there's another dimension, which is, you know, that it's an advertisement. You know that there's a sincerity to it, right? There's no joke about it. This is an ad, and we're used to somehow processing them. And one of the things that to me have changed is the fact that you cannot even, right now, you cannot even tell them correctly. You know, like things are not so black and white anymore regarding what an actual, for instance, advertorial is, and just things in terms of narratives, again, of stories. It's just more like a liquid, and it's edgeless somehow, so it's more difficult to tell. So that's important to me, you know, that the erosion of even very robust signifiers such as advertisements. So to me that was more interesting than just a piece of news. And also, I have to say, for context, that I made advertisements for many years for a living. So there's also something very personal and kind of like a little bit of an uprising from my part to now take advertisements and somehow put them out of circulation. There's something meaningful to me there.
I love that, and I think that's, first of all, the personal, context there is great, and I think there is something like, I think sincerity, fact, sincerity. It is what it says. It's got the quotes, but like, and I don't know very much about ads, but I did some searching, and so what is the history of advertising, in America? So we have this, right? So this is another Balvenie ad. Now, what might we say that is different about this? Well, first of all, there's this guy in it who's having a thought. So, this is kind of depicting someone appreciating the thing versus, this, which is way more like, minimalistic. So is this more kind of honest to show someone's reaction? Is this more of a fact? And then putting that aside, the most factual thing you might hear is say, hey, it's 10 years old. It's got 5 years. It's got honey. It's got vanilla oak. It's got peat notes, and it has the licorice in it. And then if we go to this ad, we see it's got the sherry nose, the honey taste, the oak casks, and I don't get this joke. But so I guess the question is, right, and this is a trend you see in American advertising based on the little that I know. You see line drawings of people, you see lots of words, you see small or no photographs, and then you go to this version and you see huge photographs, no people, very few words, and also, it's like incredibly staged. Like, is this even really the whiskey in these glasses, or is it realer than the? So, what do you make about when you look at these different Balvenie ads? Obviously, they all are ads, and so in that regard, have a certain sincerity to them that you mentioned. But is it more suitable to deconstruct this one than this one, or how do you feel looking at these
So,
different Balvenie ads?
in terms of deconstructing, because I'm, somehow perversely in a way, because I'm anticipating that I'm going to make a body of work with what I'm scanning. So if the page I'm scanning has a lot of density of color and texture, it's just a way more interesting page for me to work with than something that has a lot of whites and has less information, So in that way, that's why I prefer the other. Also, like the idea of deconstructing and somehow mourning photography and its specificity, And what I mean by mourning is we're seeing it, we're entering the age of AI and deepfakes and hyper subjective meaning, and there's, in my opinion, somehow a price to be paid for doing that, and that's what I got this idea of the balkanized or like a fragmented reality, right? And the problems it entails for us as a human group. So that's also important, that it's just that deletion act in itself as a basic gesture regarding visual production. It's really relevant in a moment where we're drowning with images, So that's important, and that's why I point always at the media itself, and also a part of the contemporary context is like we don't have again a couple of newspapers, that we can actually leave at home, or an advertisement that is easy to tell when we're actually looking at one. Right now, everything is just like we're not leaving the newspaper at home, is what I'm saying. We carry one in our iPhone, and it's not one, but hundreds or thousands. And it's not easy to tell what's an ad or not. And it's not easy to tell when, for instance, an intelligent agency has opened a backdoor to a social network and infuse the network with messages that work for a political construction. So all of those things are deeply complicated. And so the final image somehow that I'm having is just this human being that isn't designed for this kind of informational landscape, entering a space that is just becoming deeply like phantasmagorical. It's just as if things were losing its solidity and we're just entering a reality of symbols, a reality of meaning or of messages. And that's what I'm trying to point at, and how efficient algorithms have become in creating our own sense of subjective real, how destabilizing that is, and how easy it is to then weaponize people's cognition and people's affection, to play out a specific agenda, and that's beyond what advertising did in the past regarding the capturing of affection and cognition. So Middlemarch, I don't know, this to me is a very contemporary topic and approach.
No, I love it. And the last thing on the ad thing, the research I did, not that much research, but when I was looking at ads, it's like this ad to me.
I don't have your audio.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. Yeah.
Back? Okay, it's good. So looked around. This is an ad that struck me as very similar, right? Damn good stotch. And then it's the real thing. And so this, I think, because it's saying real, it has the word real in it. And
Yeah.
damn good. It's like this, on the one hand, this is the most postmodern thing because it's like, it's the real what? The real sugar water, zero content, zero anything, and it's bad for you. But when you look at this, you do kind of think, yeah, it is the real thing. Like back when ads were just good, this. And so this, I think, I don't know what to feel when I look at this advertising. I think this might be the best ad ever, but I don't know, because Just Do It, you still get a nice shoe with it. Here you get poison sugar water, and yet I want it, and I love it. And I'm actually, but I don't drink Coca-Cola. I only drink Reign energy drink. So if you want to join me in that, okay. So moving on. So yeah, I basically now go ahead.
I also remember, I believe it was this French philosopher Jean Baudrillard who said that the Gulf War was the first war that didn't exist, and by that he meant that as the war became somehow televised and broadcasted, it's precisely because of that, of it being mediatized, it stopped existing. It's just lost its own sense of reality, and those things. If you read it in one way, it could sound hyperbolic and dumb and very French and overly caffeinated. But if you read it with a different sensibility, it's really profound to me what he's saying. It's as if things disappeared as you try to describe them mediatically. And that's interesting. That Coke is very Baudrillardian in a way, because the real thing is the slogan. It's the real thing. Yeah. That's the real thing. And nothing is the real thing, And
it's not actually Coke. It's not Coke in the glass.
It's not. It doesn't need to be actual anything to be real. You just have to say that, to put it on a slogan in that manner. Yeah.
And it looks more like Coke than real Coke would, I'm sure, because photography is its own distortionary, thing. So
exactly. That's precisely correct. It's like, it's more real than the real thing. It's more Coca-Cola than Coca-Cola. Yeah, of course. And when something becomes more real than the real, it disappears. Like the cyborg being, that's also Baudrillard, the cyborg being more human than human. And
they should put it's the real thing on this, because this looks more real than a photograph. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more real than a photograph. That's a different logic to me. That a painting. Yeah, because you can see another thing stuck between the layer of reality and the painting, which is the subjective, the stroke. So that almost gives it an actually peculiar sense of reality, by the way. That contradiction.
Because I just think about it like, if you were, what would it feel like to actually be there? Anyway, so why don't we just, because I want to make sure we get into, I like the cold open and drilling into this stuff, but I'm more familiar now than maybe some of our listeners. So I would like to just kind of, what are we talking about here? We are talking about a collection called The End of Facts, which is by our guests, and it's images, and they are NFTs, and you can look at them, and that's what we're talking about right now. So this is all very, very real. This is not theoretical whatsoever. You can go to Rob's website, robertosalazar.co. And you can see some of these, and they're also available on Foundation. I just want to ground people in some facts.
Sure.
That is a fact. These are all facts.
Yeah.
Now, we are looking at images. I want to just really get through the details of this collection because I think this is like the core of what drew me in. And plus, you just released another video about it. You're doing content. One thing I've noticed is that the images have names. And this is very funny because it sounds like social stigma. So Sigma is a brand of lenses, and this is a social sigma. So GPT, which is the pun expert in my life, would love this. But talk to me about the names of these images.
Yeah, well, it's a convention that I employed. So the first word is a category. This is in this case it's a social category. Imagine that you were gonna pull data together. So a category, and then you're sorting them, and then like a camera brand, Fuji, Sigma, Samsung, whatever, and then a focal length, and then a format. So it's a way of pointing at somehow, for instance, the way an AI data set is created to train them. For instance, it's there's something like deeply machine-like and almost creepy and slightly dehumanizing about a very cold sorting order. It's not the kind of sorting order that it's human, meaning it's the kind of sorting order that becomes stories or narratives, but it's just almost technical. So that's why, and also like just then the fantasy that maybe that image is not one but several, that's also interesting to me.
I love it. And so basically there's and I was just chatting in the chat. There was someone in there, and if you're listening to this, Mr. Robot 961, I'm here. So come back. Twitch chat, good chat. So the names where there's a Leica, there's a similarity that you were seeing between like these are three sort of dimensions, kind of, and you were kind of sorting them in that way. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, those are, I mean, again, a focal length. So there are two Leicas, one with a 50 millimeters and one with a 35. And again, if you're a photographer and you're sorting a large volume of photographs, you encounter those situations very often. You're just pulling or calling the images together.
But this seems more zoomed in than this, and yet this has the
Yeah. I mean, if that's a contradiction to you, it's fine. I am not into. I don't find that ultra small detail important because you're not looking at an image. You're looking at just a notion of debris. There's no lens utilized to construct this anymore.
Yep. No, that makes sense. I agree. That's sort of a weird quote unquote lens to look at it with, and yet I kind of the bigger one sort of appealed to me personally. And I think another interesting thing here to hear from you a little bit is about the process here and kind of the symbolism inherent there that I really took away. So, how do you so like someone who's like, doesn't know anything about anything might look at this and say, well, painting the Mona Lisa is hard, but since this isn't representational, you can just do whatever. So good luck with that. But there is still this question of how you did it because, there are no brushstrokes and so forth. So, how did you kind of literally do this? Tell us all your secrets, and then kind of how does that connect to some of the themes behind the work?
Well, to me, that's interesting, Middlemarch. You said easy, and the particular style of them is not very common, even though you could say that they're easily placed in the glitch aesthetics. If you see them closely, there's a sorry about the dog. There's a particular aesthetics that I haven't seen that much. It's just because of the tools that I utilized. So I scanned the page and I wasn't entirely sure what I was trying to do with it except to make it disappear. That was my basic proposition. And I was even considering maybe using a kind of painting or marker or whatever. I just wanted to somehow redact the image. And then I was going through some very complicated health issues because I was prescribed benzos for anxiety, and I took them for more than a decade. And then I was feeling like shit, so I weaned myself off the medication across almost a year and a half, just to get to the point of reaching zero, because it's very risky if you do it quickly, and I'm more uncomfortable. And I started having cognitive issues, deep ones, and I couldn't use the computer properly. So I made a lot of mistakes constantly, and I just got to the point where I started auditing my own mistakes, and I used the wrong shortcut, or clicked on the wrong menu. And so I started recording actions of everything that I was doing on Photoshop, for instance, and and so I could go back and see what was happening, and also on Lightroom I had an accident. I wanted to make a panorama, a stitch panorama, and instead of picking two images that were similar, I just picked images that were irreconcilable, visually, and like a little explosion happened between them being fused together. That was gorgeous. So, and I was interested in algorithms and what they do to content, and subjective fabrication of reality. And so then I realized that Lightroom and Photoshop contain already algorithms under certain tools, such as the stitch function in Lightroom. So then I started becoming more aware, and just made a lot of exercise. For instance, there's one infamous action where I'm just like making a huge image super small, and then big and super small, and then again and again and again and again and again. It got to a point where it lost all its resolution, but after doing that 100 times, suddenly pixels came back, and they weren't necessarily pixelated. And so it's just this a weird way of understanding the digital as a material, if I'm making sense. There's almost like a massaging of the material itself, like playing with clay. And it took me a long time to stabilize more or less the results that I can actually then make a series of them. And some people ask me, why do I make so much variations? And the reason is that this is like an hypothesis of sorts. I wouldn't be happy if I got one good one. I needed to somehow prove that the technique was stable enough that I could repeat it. And when this happens and something feels cohesive, and I'm able to deploy that new technique in a more predictable manner, then I'm close to being finished. But it's just a really feverish, ignorant process, and that's one of the things that I wanted to really make a distance from coding, which is cold and more rational and more structured. I didn't have the mindset to do that. That was impossible to me. And so again, Pollock, if you want to make a little bit of an action painting or a more physical act of creation, well, that's as close as I could get in the digital without employing VR and stuff like that, And this is not a minor detail. The feverish, accidental aspect of it, I think, makes them look the way they do.
I love that. And the thing that struck out to me in particular thematically was this idea of the stitching, the panorama, right? So if you have ever used out there, our listeners, a panorama tool or idea, first of all, the iPhone killed all of this stuff because now anyone can do that in 1 second with the iPhone thing, which is annoying. But before the iPhone, when I was a boy, the way to do a panorama was you'd take like 10 photos and they'd all overlap a little bit, and the software would basically meld them all together into one seamless photo, and there's a aberration thing where it looks like a sphere, so it correct that and you're fine. And so when you're stitching things together, that's how you think facts should work in the world. So like something and I know something and your thing's a little different than mine, whatever, but there is enough overlap that you can stitch them together. But when you try to stitch together things that have no overlap, that are totally incommensurable, that come from different universes, it ain't going to be pretty. And so I thought that was like a really cool theme because just to be able to get some visually impactful kind of metaphorical a representation of what it is like to try to stitch together facts these days, like what two people regard as facts but are completely from different universes. So I thought that was a
Exactly.
just a very cool way of
Yeah,
looking at it.
because that there's some sense making at the level of the algorithm, trying to understand the surface, the visual surface of the image, and we are, as human beings, are doing the same. We're parsing bits and pieces of meaning to construct a larger story. So that was interesting to me, hardcore. And I have to say something, and no offense to my wonderful American friends, but I spoken to a lot of people from all over the world, and the only group of people in which this dynamic becomes incredibly evident is in America. So what I mean by this dynamic incredibly evident is just like the conversation, just by utilizing a word or pointing at a political coordinate, the conversation instantly becomes adversarial, and people react very intensely. And I care about that a lot because there are some hypotheses about why. And one of them is just like America has been incredibly digitized more efficiently as a society and has, let's say, more algorithmic pressures regarding algorithms that curate content under its citizens. So that to me is very important because somehow the vanguard of technological innovation is also showing this shadowy side that I don't take for granted, and I believe we have to take very seriously, and that doesn't happen in other places. I'm serious. And also there's also regarding this is called hyperpolitics to me. Hyperpolitics meaning like somehow there's a metaphysical void of meaning. There's a coordinate that was available before that we used to orient ourselves, and now it's not available anymore. And you can call it spirituality, religion, any kind of metaphysics you like. The thing is that if you let go of that, only politics is left to construct a notion of the North, a notion of orientation. And I believe that's one of the reasons also why politics are so like emblazoned such intensely, because they're the ultimate proof of your value as a human being, and nothing else. So utilizing politics as a proxy for the value of someone is incredibly problematic and not very productive, in my opinion.
Very interesting, and I'll ask my other, because it's like I personally, and it's actually even controversial and political to, I would say that in terms. I agree with you, but I would say it's country. It's like the term cancel culture, whatever. It's like I personally would never say anything political ever to anyone. So that's what I am. It's fun because you want to be able to try ideas and say this thing, and even if you don't fully mean it, get a reaction, integrate it. Like this is creative destruction. I certainly would never say anything political to anyone, including my closest, whatever. I would ask, and maybe that's not exactly necessarily what you're saying, but that jumps in my head. I would ask, we have some Americans, we have some non-Americans on this podcast. What do you think, Dove?
Yeah, I guess I embody what you're talking about in terms of like Americans who are very like incendiary and like have very strong reactions to political conversations. And I really enjoy those conversations, even though I don't post a lot of political stuff on social media. But to me, the fact that people get so upset about it means that they care a lot. And I think that people get upset because they feel that they are protecting a group of people, whatever that group of people is. It's like a protective thing. So when you meet someone who opposes what your beliefs are or challenges that, you feel like, God, I have all these people in my life that I care about so deeply, and the thing that you are saying right now tells me that you don't care about them. But that's my family, and that's my tribe. So like I need to attack. So I think it's good, and I think like you said, like with a quickly digitized society, we're just able to like reach people faster about political and social. I hate calling everything political because there's certain issues that people call political and they really aren't. They're just social issues.
This question of online, in life. Piv sent me this for the chat, so obviously we can all read this. We know more languages than I only know English, but this is well, anyway, Piv, how does this relate to our thing? You sent me this. I thought this was interesting. What are we looking at right now, Piv? Piv is frozen. I'll jump in. Essentially, what we are looking at, as Piv told me, is a show where people look up. This is a Belgian show, so this is not American. This is a classic Belgian architecture house. They look up what someone says online, and then they go confront them in real life about it. So everyone's dream show, basically. And maybe Piv, you could tell us, look at your what you observe culturally speaking in Belgium through the lens of what we're saying in this show.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, it's the very typical reactions of people they do on social media, mostly about politics or about social issues. Mostly like mean little comments, and a reporter goes to their own house, to their own front door, and then he says something like, "Yeah, you're quite a big guy on the internet."
What did he say online?
Like this guy?
Yeah.
This guy said it was about a protest.
Was it the saltpeter guy?
Instead of putting water in the water cannon, they should put saltpeter in it.
And an American would never say that, because no American knows what saltpeter is. We're a caring society here.
And then the reactions are always the same. Like, yeah, it's a joke. I don't mean that. I like these people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think the online thing, right? Like, did you know that even though, well, I guess that's a bad example because America is so violent, but many times if you talk to someone who plays Fortnite and go to their house, they don't shoot you in the head. So I think part of it also is, the way in which it is almost too easy to, go into game mode, especially on a place like Twitter where, you get the points. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, but at the same time, I do want to, historical claims are always troubling, right? Not troubling, challenging, because when you make a historical claim, you are doing it from history and you are doing it from your context. And so it's hard. And so I think the claim that you are sort of making, Rob, and you made in some of your things, is that like things were different back during the Balvenie ad days, or at least at some point you could go and talk to someone at a party, or you could have some kind of overlap. The religion thing you mentioned, like there was a way to have a conversation that you can't have now. Things are different. And that's a challenging statement always. And I always get in trouble for this because I'm saying like AI is going to end the world, and Dub's saying, hey, that's what they said about the internet or whatever. So it's like, yes, I get it. I do that thing too. But can we really say, outside of historical context, quote unquote, objectively, can we really say that the past was better or different, or was it just a different language? Was it just packaged differently? Were people less divided in the past? Richard Nixon, the president, lies to America. Isn't that the pinnacle of bad? Anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, it's, again, sorry about the dog. And
don't say sorry about the dog. Just to interrupt you. It's a dog noise. Okay, that's not a fact. We don't know it's a dog. Okay, the fact is the noise. Anyway,
yeah, it may be an app on my iPhone. Look. Well, I mean, there's a lot of studies right now about the effects of social media, but I'm gonna put them aside, and I'm not arguing for a more beautiful past. What I'm talking about is just that I struggle to do it in very simple terms, unsuccessfully. That's why I just referenced the 70s and the 80s, but I'm just trying to point out, and I don't know precisely, I'm discovering that along with everybody else, how a different relationship with media basically turn into a different notion of reality, and how we're entering this hyper-mediatic state. For the reasons I said before, because everything is now so approachable. Borges said, though, that mirrors are abominable because they multiply the number of men. And you can say that iPhones are abominable because they multiply the number of news.
Yeah.
So
plus you have Twitter alts. Twitter alts also, he would have hated Twitter alt accounts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pointing my finger at something that is really affecting us, and you can see uh, many correlations as we've entered the past decade and this one about certain social effects and how they've been, again, fueled by mediatized stories. I mean, even the Twitter files already are shedding light on that topic. And look, my one of my conclusions or propositions after I finished this body of work was something that I called metapolitics. By that I mean that somehow it's kind of like refraining slightly from utilizing a tweet or some political content as a proxy for who someone is instantly, and kind of like recovering space from the political into the humanitarian again, and give each other a little bit of breathing room. I believe that, honestly, it may sound very naive, but I believe that it is important as a group of people that are become very aware of their media landscape, and I think we really have to understand that. Uh, yes, so that's Borges, Dove. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I just read the exact quote.
Yeah, so
Oh.
that those things interest me. It's like a house of mirrors in a way, and it affects us deeply, but in a not an easy way to pin down. And I can see it in myself. When I start consuming a certain brand of content, and the algorithm shifts and starts giving me just that for a couple of months, I can see how some a perspective ossifies in me. And I don't know. I think we just have to be deeply aware of that. I think it's a good idea. And let me give you another example of where real life and digital somehow clash and gives us some very weird cultural artifacts. Again, in America, again, Twitter, for instance. Uh, there's the word Hitler is utilized very commonly to describe somebody with which we disagree with a lot, or like Nazi, Hitler, whatever. And I mean, I get it. I get why, of course. But then again, if you come to Latin America, what word would you use to describe a drug cartel who kidnapped 26 people in the state of San Luis Potosí in one event? 26 people in one event. So, I mean, because if we use the American threshold, Hitler doesn't cut it anymore. We need a heavier word, but Hitler is already utilized for someone who put a stupid tweet. And so that word is captured, and it's not fair. And somehow I even got to the point where I sometimes consider that even the notion of violence is misunderstood right now. It's just semiotical violence. But let us remind ourselves of actual violence too. I mean, the kind of violence that makes somebody dissolve a human body in a container with acid in Michoacan.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Middlemarch, think about, again, meaning semiotics. It's like this upheaval and this war of data. It's a disembodied thing. And that's incredibly interesting, I at least to me. And again, it's so abstract. Forgive me if I'm not ultra precise in my observations, but I think there's something there that's worthwhile our time and attention.
I mean, I think it's this kind of, when I see it, and like for me, it's like, at a high level when I approach this stuff, it's always like, two sides to there's always the dialectic, and you can't, both sides have a value. And I think when there's another saying, I forget who said it, who said, sometimes younger people react in childish ways to problems only they can see. And so, me, there's the sort of like experienced discourse on this, like how it actually looks, and then maybe that looks a certain way, but under the covers, like what is going on. And so I think there is something when it comes to like violence or whatever, like I agree that's like what is violence? Typically, it's thought of like you hit someone, but at the same time, there is something about the milieu that you live in, the language that you use, the way all of these things function. That affects what is going on. So I think saying that a piece of terminology or language is violence, I think on the one hand is counterintuitive and weird, but on the other hand spread across society, but it's weird. Yeah, you see 20 people, 100 people killed, then you can sort of think, okay, well, what is actual so I think it's both, really. I mean,
The problem, yeah.
I certainly personally like not being criticized or scrutinized. So there's this aspect, but I do I do see the I think if you take meaning seriously, right? Like if you look at looking at the advertisement, right? Like when I was a kid, I look at this. You can look at any ad and not even think anything about it, like whatever. But if you look at an advertising piece of advertisement seriously, it's actually it takes quite a lot to analyze sort of what's going on here, especially you look at it through through history. And so I think if you are someone who says it's just an ad, who cares about the ad, then maybe that's not the most enlightened view. And then someone might say, well, it's just language, it's just this terminology, it's a small thing, who cares about that? I'm not going to use any actual examples here, of course, because whatever. So it's not really that elucidating. But I think we can all agree that one way to measure a man is to go elk hunting with him, because then you will really learn what he's like, right? Another way to measure a man is to see what he puts in front of his face before he goes to the bathroom in the morning. And if it's an iPhone, and I do the same thing, or I don't know, what do you guys do?
Yeah.
What's the question? The question is, what do you put in your face in the morning?
Do you look at your iPhone before you use the bathroom in the morning?
Yeah, but
sometimes depends. I was gonna say glass of water. That's
Ooh.
my go-to when I wake up. I need water. I put water right on my bedside, so I have it when I wake up.
That's great. You're enlightened. Piv, do you look at your phone first thing?
Yeah, probably before the glass of water, yes.
Oh my god.
But I don't think it's a
no.
bad thing. I think that's like such a boomer take to be like, oh, these kids looking at their iPhones in bed. Like, who cares?
I do too. It makes me feel bad. Every time I look at the phone, it makes me feel bad. Unless, that's the thing, unless, but most of the time.
Good. The
But
iPhone gives you social connection, social awareness. You stay up
That's
to
the
date.
unless. That's the unless. 99% of the time, it's just blank, looking at tweets that have already have 10,000 likes and are completely generic. And I'm like, ooh, another prompt I can use in Midjourney. Okay, let's jump back. So, I said before, I want to keep the hits coming. I do need to now ask you about my favorite thing, and that is AI and how AI is going to kill us, or at least do really bad things
real quick
to
because
us. So
we have a long AI doomer conversation every time. I just want to note that we are close to an hour, and this conversation has the potential to last an hour.
yeah, well, that's Rob's fault because he liked a tweet of mine. And if someone likes my tweet, that's the only good time you can go to Twitter. If you see an artist liking your tweet. So I just want to briefly throw this out there as proof of being liked. This is what is the shortest possible prompt you can give to Midjourney, the famous AI thing. And you can do a space, but a space still conveys meaning. You can't do blank, it won't allow you, but you can use a Unicode character called a zero width space, which is basically a space that doesn't take up any space, so it's nothing. And when you give this to Midjourney, this is what it spits out. It spits out this scene as like the foundation of how AI sees the world. So to me, this is a scene that has no meaning because the input was nothing, and yet you could probably figure out a meaning from it. It's kind of unsettling. I don't know what. Tell me the backstory behind my amazing tweet. Now, tell me your view on how to look at this AI stuff. Do you use it in your work? And are we dead? Are we dead in 10 minutes?
Well, I don't know. Regarding your tweet, I was thinking, for instance, in audio software, there's a function in which you record a microphone before you start speaking. So the microphone has a register of how your room is sounding. Basically, the register of just the white noise in your space. And after that, the computer learns and it's able to actually remove that frequency your recording. And when you said that you basically didn't prompt anything and the Midjourney gave that result, to me that means it's almost like the noise floor, the aesthetical noise floor of the technology itself. It's just like it's inherent aesthetics, it's background noise speaking, like it's that's it, almost even before anything is prompted. So that's an interesting result. And the thing that I don't appreciate about AI is like, well, first of all, it's the same power structures that are building those technologies. Californian big tech, and then again they're deployed socially without asking anybody. Honestly, because legislation is lagging way behind, and they're disruptive economically and socially, and we're just basically being, like silent spectators to wherever disruption they decide to make, and that's strange. And it's also like it's going to become or can become a self-perfecting technology, which is incredibly worrying. And also, I mean, just look at the trends, of American corporations, seeking profit and doing whatever they need to do. And this is their latest creation. And I don't know how that's going to go, but it's not necessarily sounding amazing, in my view, and yeah, it's deeply non-democratic in many ways. It's just like dropping a little bomb which has a different format, and deal with it. You deal with it, right? And let's just like usurp and take over human creation, and let's just commodify it and turn it into just another data point, and let's make it work. And of all people, then, just like artists some of them are cheering for it, and it's like, well, look who's got crushed behind the wheel of that very heavy mechanism. And
Yeah.
just, so it's complicated, but it's not I'm not very optimistic, and I see that trend in which everything becomes more digital, not reversing but increasing. And look, you could even say that as we somehow are disembodying our societies, as we become just a data point or symbols or signs, to the point where then a symbol and a sign, for instance a tweet, becomes the most important signal you could send. And that's we're not built for that. We're not just like a brain in a jar. We're many many more things. Okay, so that part about the disembodiment is important.
I love that. And let me just jump back to the first thing you said, because I really thought that was fascinating and hilarious, and of course wasn't what I was thinking, right? So the idea is if you record the white noise, i.e. the noise that just with no signal comes into it, just what's going on, you can subtract that. And so back in the day when life was simple, white noise was just like shh. Now, white noise is this, basically. So you now have to subtract this from every image you create with
Exactly.
AI.
Exactly.
This is what's going in without any of you. This is just what the room sounds like now. So if you ever want to go into an empty room, what will be painted on the walls is this. And if that doesn't look good to you, if that looks kind of too intense for you, if you don't want to see these two people, well, then sorry, because you're going to get the balloons in your empty room. So if you buy a house, a white box, thing, it's staged, it'll have this. I've come from, well, yeah, I mean,
Look, it's like remember static, Middlemarch. There, like in October, there's a room full of static, and your hair is up in the air, and everything starts giving you little shocks. And you realize the static exists just because what's happening to your hair or your clothes or whatever. But now there's like a meaning static, like a meaning floor noise everywhere that just models the signals to such an extent that it's just very difficult to break above the signal, the noise ratio, and just actually be a human being again, be a person again, and be understood as a whole being, not just a tweet. So, and we're also seeing in this, let's say, outrage or culture of outrage online, we're also seeing like the business plans of the social networks themselves playing out. Because outreach drives engagement, and that's also problematic and socially cruel. Yeah.
So what is the way out? I mean, one thing I saw you wrote or said somewhere was the idea that in the past they would also do this, but at least they would show you a document and the redactions, the blackouts be visible.
Yeah.
So at least you'd be able to see, hey, I'm getting, totally screwed over here and I can't know what's going on. But at least they show me that, which is actually kind of puzzling. Why would they do that? Why don't they just like change it or whatever? But they used to do that, metaphorically speaking. Now there's no document, there's no redactions, there's no anything. You just wake up and open your eyes and you're in a different world and whatever. But is there, am I a doomer or not? I don't know. But doomerism I describe as basically, the giddy, feeling and exposition of the idea that we cannot be saved. And so there's social media doomerism, there's AI doomerism, which is my favorite form. There's, of course, climate doomerism. What are the other doomerisms? Are you a doomer or is there a way out?
Oh, I'm just trying to point out a contemporary problem as best as I can. But I have a lot of hope, and the hope is just in somehow the intelligence of the life that inhabits us. And what I mean by that is like I believe there's an update pending regarding how we deal with this pervasive information ecology and get savvy with it, and be able to navigate it in a healthier manner and be creative and resignify the other, resignify the person we disagree with. Honestly, we don't have a choice. And,
this generation hates updates. You know how your iPhone says there's an update pending. Would you like to install it now or later tonight? Everyone presses later tonight. No one does it.
You have to ponder if it's worthwhile, but there's something about the human spirit that has to somehow emerge. Honestly, it's either coming from there or it's either coming from there. And not to have the allergy of the other. Try not to. Try to rehumanize other positions, and maybe make the encounter with the symbolic other sacred. Resacralize the encounter with the other. Recover the us meeting in a physical space. I don't know, right? It's becoming savvy, like a guy that is has streetwise, right? Some I don't know, a hustler or a pimp or whatever. Well, we have to become media wise urgently, and behave accordingly. And it's us to imaginate the possibilities. That's what I'm imagining, and maybe it's very limited, but I think we should try to imagine a way out.
Let's do it. I love that note. Dove, Piv, any closing bombshells to drop? Should we not try to become media savvy? Is that what you guys are saying? No, okay. I think we're all on the same page on that.
Yeah.
Any bombs? If there are no bombshells, mega bombshells coming up. No bombshells.
Do we have time to pull up quickly another work?
Sure.
It's the Null's Salem variation.
Okay.
These are really beautiful. They are photographs that are very close to paintings, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe if you want to say a few words about them.
Yeah, sure. Let me just wanna. Okay. Yeah. Can you peek the second image, please, Middlemarch? That one, the moisture of fog. That's a good example. Okay. So, I mean, my whole practice for the last 5 years is somehow concerned with the social and media. So this is a perfect example of just taking the ideas from the End of Facts series further. So in this work, I'm now actually trying to describe the media landscape. I've been saying that term several times. during this conversation, and we have to be media landscape aware and of our own and others. And so I wanted to have a take on explore a very innocent, simple aesthetic. I wanted them to look almost as if I made these little drawings. I call them like that, drawings with a wood color or pencil. But it's also, again, a deleted advertisement. You can see a little bit of those artifacts or remaining artifacts in the details of the image. And just make a little landscape, which is a classical topic in art, but in the same way, infuse it with a conceptual notion of all the pixels contained in these works also stem from an advertisement that depicts a forest, a landscape. So that's it. I like to make work that is powerful, but at the same time very silent, and also elegant in that dimension. I don't want them screaming. So it's almost naive. It's almost pretty innocent. But if you start digging, you'll realize some heavier possibilities. And so if you go into that collection on Foundation, you'll see a statement, and the statement is just a fantasized story that I wrote, in which me and another person are walking actually through the advertisement. And I think, it's inside the NFT. So click on any, and that story. And it's just also full of tropes of photography. There's an accident that happened at some point because one guy is walking behind the other, and the guy in front is carrying a flash. The flash just dumps its charge, and he's blinded and gets hurt. But the whole idea is just very photographic, and to me it's very beautiful. Those little details. And if you see the original ad, and then you start seeing the results and read this text, you'll get a beautiful sensation of what I'm trying to portray. Yeah. And there's an accident. That's a piece of the original, but I just clean it up a little bit to put it there. Yeah, and it's also Salem is the brand that I utilized, and Salem connects to the Salem witch hunts and burning and censorship and othering people, and so there's several things that are, to me, beautiful coincidences there. Yeah, Pete, I don't know if that's interesting, or you want to comment on something else?
No, I think the Salem, this in terms is also an advertisement. And Balvenie is also like bad for you or whatever, and for some people really, really, really bad. But the cigarette thing, right? This is the ultimate, in terms of what we in contemporary American culture would regard as like, not truthful or whatever, or at least pretty weird, right? That it says like this is the greatest way to chill out, and then it says actually it's really bad for you. So, I think this is this is in some ways more post-truth than a lot of stuff going on, that's rightly criticized today. Like, how to parse this, image exactly from the contemporary, it's just hard to. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's really a fascinating, and it also has the real thing. It's big word, couple words. These are descriptive words, so it's not really the real thing, but this is the real thing. Boom. Fascinating.
And this series is a take on drawing. The End of Facts is a slightly take on painting somehow. Salt Saliva Metal is a take on sculpture or surface texture. So I also like to point at historical artistic tropes or genres, but then make them my own and spend them in a different way. But again, as in The End of Facts, you can approach the drawings and just like them, and that's great. You don't need anything else. And to me, they're gorgeous, and they're gorgeous because they're weird, because of the limitations of the process. I couldn't do whatever I wanted. There's not a single moment in the piece where I actually grabbed a pencil and make a drawing. It's all full of restraints, and restraints make the result different and interesting, in my opinion. So that's more or less how I operate, if it makes sense. And you can see me. You can almost predict, like, oh my God, now he's like taking on this genre or these artistic tropes with this input source material that he tried to respect or be constrained by, and over. And I find joy in working like that. Yeah.
Very beautiful. Just looking at this is soothing me. Would I take the menthol or the non-menthol? That's for next week. You will learn that. You will learn that detail next week. And I'm guarding that secret. This has been the Capsule 21 podcast. Our amazing guest, Rob Salazar. I'm Middlemarch. My co-hosts are Piv and Dovetail. We are Capsule 21, coming at you every week with a new podcast until we die or the media landscape devours us. If you have made it this far, the good news is that you are next, and the other good news is that we are next week. We'll be back next week with more amazing content. Thank you for listening. Capsule 21 out.